And going to the commodity space, so one of the hottest topics there at this time is oil. It rebounded today after plunging more than 3% in the previous session as implementation of sanctions on Russia seaborne crude oil eased concerns about oversupply or relaxing of China's COVID-19 curbs bolstered the demand outlook. Brent crude futures gained 38 cents to $83.06 a barrel, while West Texas Intermediate crude rose 37 cents to $77.29 a barrel. The group of seven set a top price of $60 a barrel on Russian crude, aiming to limit Moscow's ability to finance its war in Ukraine. But Russia has said it will not abide by the measure, even if it has to cut production. A price cap to be enforced by the G7 nations, the European Union, and Australia comes on top of the EU's embargo on imports of Russian crude by sea and similar pledges by the United States, Canada, Japan, and Britain. And we do know that this is one hot topic that has refused to go away, talking about the issue of the cap on Russian oil. But even before now, I do remember that for about a month ago or so, China and India were able to buy Russian oil for between 50 and $60. So one could ask if the price cap of 60 is actually trying to play along, so it's not too difficult to implement. But even that has brought some controversy, of course, as we know that Russia has been kicking very hard against this, and we wonder what China and India are doing at this time. To have that conversation, we have Dumebi Oluwole now in the studio. Hi, Dumebi. Good morning.
Good morning. Good
Are
morning.
you on Russia? Are you on China?
I
Because this
just want the
price
war
cap,
to end.
you just want the
I
one.
just want the war to end.
Because this issue of price cap, I mean, it's been in the news for months. Now they finally settled for $60. But I mean, even before now, India and China were getting it at about 60, between 50 and $60. So it sounds like maybe the EU or the G7 are just trying to play safe along the line, even though Russia is still kicking against it.
Yeah. So you're right about the G7 still trying to, play it safe somewhat, and that's because they need oil to continue running into the market. They need oil to remain in supply, and Russia is one of the global, the biggest oil exporting countries. So completely shutting Russia's tap is going to be a huge blow to the global economy. It's going to completely disrupt the global oil supply market. And if you remember, the U.S. has been, nudging OPEC to actually increase oil supply. Sometime in the year, it tried to tap from its strategic reserves just to prop up supply and tame
Prices.
tame prices. So what this price cap basically is saying, you can produce your oil, you can supply, but not as much. You're not going to make as much money as you would have with how oil prices have been. Setting a price cap at $60 per barrel while oil prices are at $90 per barrel is, shutting them off 30
About
$30, yeah,
30.
about $30 per barrel. But when you look at the fact that Russia is countries like China, India are still going to, patronize Russian oil. It definitely has more of an impact on people, on countries that are not going to be patronizing Russian oil. Why? Because supply is already tight. OPEC has maintained its 2 million barrel per day supply cut. They're not increasing prices, increasing supply anytime soon. Even some analysts are saying that there's some concerns that OPEC might actually decide to cut production further to keep prices at $90 per barrel, because that is the benchmark that the cartel is looking at right now, $90 per barrel, and oil prices actually declined to about 88 to about
Yes, it's
85,
80,
yeah,
yeah.
$80 per barrel
Yeah,
sometime
83 this
yes,
morning.
yes, about $83. So they're trying to nudge it back to $90 per barrel, because that's like a break-even point for both price takers and price followers within the cartel. Now, looking at Russia now, with Russia saying that they're going to that they would rather they'll rather cut off production. That's another impact on
On
oil
prices,
on
because
prices.
it's going to affect supply that is available in
Exactly.
the global space and
Exactly.
subsequently prices.
Exactly. But there are like two key data points that that have somewhat propped the EU and G7 countries to institute this cap. So even with the embargo on Russian oil, Russia still generated Russia's revenue from oil was still as high as $17 billion in
Yes,
October. They made a
yes.
lot of money even with the ban.
We're not
And
even talking about gas. Then
exactly.
we have some other minerals, you
Exactly,
know.
exactly. So from oil alone, Russia was able to make as much as $17 billion in just October. Their revenue actually increased by about $1.7 billion. So with that happening, the G7 and EU countries are looking at, oh, oil is still somewhat supporting or financing financing Russia, to sustain the war, and
The
they're trying
war.
to, cut
And
cut
then
cut
there's
that
also
off.
the plan to wean off gas.
Yes, there's also that plan,
That's going
but
to be more difficult anyway.
exactly because we're already we're entering into the winter season for them. Although from when we look at gas prices are really high, and
Yes.
countries in the EU have actually tried to slow their demand. Actually, they're trying to manage their demand within this period. So you're seeing things like they're trying to basically manage their demand. They're not consuming as much as they would have. So it's like you're trying to shuffle it, basically trying to manage the
Yeah, I
resources that you
think
have because of
there was a
expectations is
time
going to
in
reduce.
Germany, I know that street lights couldn't
Yes,
be
well,
on at
yes, it
some
could at
point,
some
you know,
yeah,
so they were
exactly,
trying to cut demand, anything that will
exactly,
pull on the demand for gas
exactly.
and
And some
try.
of these countries have returned to coal as well. They've returned to coal.
Yes, there
So
goes the climate change plan.
exactly. So all of these things put together, you see that they're trying to just basically manage their demand. They're also reaching out to other countries like Nigeria to increase their gas supply, just so that they have an alternative, or they have multiple alternatives to Russian gas, considering that they're instituting all of these bans and embargoes and
And
now
you know,
price
we just
caps.
finished COP27 with climate change top on the list.
Yeah.
And yet, a lot of these Western countries, developed countries, have gone back to coal because of, you know, this war going on in Ukraine to sustain the economy. So it's a contradiction,
I
kind
mean,
of.
it's a contradiction, but it's somewhat like a necessary evil right now. I mean, what are the alternatives right now? We can't clearly transition completely to renewable energy when there's a huge shock to global supply of oil, there's a huge shock to global supply of gas. So even if you want to, the plan was to wean, slowly from these fossil fuels. Now that there's a huge dent to supply and demand is constantly increasing, you have to make do with what you have. So that's exactly, so basically the global economy's hands are tied. These economies, they have to make do with what they
So
have.
where is Nigeria in all of this? Price at 83, which is still more than what we budgeted for in our budget. But obviously what it means is subsidies increasing.
Exactly.
Fuel queues are still out there, at least in
Exactly.
Lagos. I saw someone
Exactly.
on my way to work this morning. And
Exactly.
if NNPC imports, obviously with 83 and naira depreciating, that means we're spending more to import.
Exactly.
And those off-takers from the NNPC will also are in there to make business.
Exactly.
You know, so all of this just have a spillover effect.
Exactly. Ini, I mean, maybe you should go into economics analysis at this point. but
I guess because
you're
I
very
live with it. We
spot on.
live with it every day.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
you don't have to think far. You're seeing it. It's happening to you
You're
every
very
day.
right. I mean, your analysis was very spot on at this point. But just to emphasize, basically, Nigeria is a price taker in all of this, and the fact that we're still net importers of refined petroleum products, whether cooking gas, kerosene, diesel,
Diesel.
PMS, all of these things, because the prices are higher now in the global market, we're definitely going to keep spending more. And the fact that the naira is also depreciating is also going to have a huge impact on it. I mean, although a respite to this is the fact that oil production has actually increased, but it's
Yes.
still not sufficient enough
But I
for us
think
to
we should
generate a lot of
celebrate
money.
that too.
Exactly, but
Remember
that's a
when
win.
we were
That's a
producing
win.
less than a
Million,
million? That
exactly.
was was heartbreaking.
But now that we have the Forcados terminal, back in operations, alongside other terminals, we're seeing that we're noticing an increase in our domestic production. And if this continues, I mean, it could help us generate more revenue. But the downside to it is the extremely bloated fuel subsidy payments that we have. The NNPC has still not been able to remit any kobo to the federation account, and that is significantly, hurting our external reserves, is significantly hurting our export earnings, is significantly hurting the government's purse to actually do anything substantial in the economy.
You know, that one good thing out of that would have been for state governments, subnationals, to begin to look inwards, you understand, and look at these commodities that we have everywhere. In every part of the country, we do have one commodity or the other, one mineral resource or the other. Imagine if state government take this as a challenge and say, okay, no oil money, we don't want to depend on that anymore, let's look inwards. I think it would be a bright side to all of this dark story.
Yeah, it would be a bright side to it, but at the same time, we also have to look at all those structural deficiencies that are in place. Even if we want to even if state governments take this up, we have to consider what is currently existing. The landscape is, number one, the state governments are cash strapped. They're not making enough money to actually, embark on some of these ambitious projects. They still depend on FAC disbursements from the federal government. Every month, you see state governors or their representatives reporting to Abuja to get funds to run their states. But if you look at when you look at what's happening globally, several states actually do generate their own revenue. The goal is to be competitive enough as states to attract more investments from private players, to attract investment to your state, to attract businesses to your state. So the core of it all is for policymakers to have the development mindset, to understand that the goal, our responsibility is to make our states, or to make the entire country in general, business friendly. So you can't have a situation where, look at the situation that happened with Kogi State and Dangote Cement. BUA had to release a statement to say, oh, this is happening. We have land there, but I mean, with all of this happening, are we sure we're even going to, push through with our own investments?
That is a scary factor for other investors.
For other investors. So state governments and policymakers in general have to come to that place where they need to understand the fact that our role is to create an enabling business environment. The government's role is not to create jobs. That's not the work of the government. That's not the role of the government. The role of the government is to create an enabling environment for businesses to thrive, for businesses to come in. When there are more businesses, we're going to see an increase in output. We'll see an increase in employment opportunities. We'll see an increase in total factor productivity. Why? Because people are enabled, and Nigeria has vast resources.
Maybe when we've had a lot of states holding summits, I'm sure you've been following it.
Yes.
Now it's becoming like a trend. So these states have their own summit, and they get investors together. They have long hours of conversations. One would expect that after one summit, we would see the result of, because I believe there should be results. I mean, all those things you're saying, they are the conversations that have been had over and over again in this summit and some other fora. But what about the implementation of it? We're still waiting for that.
Yes, I mean, that's where the pipeline always gets clogged when it comes to the policy environment, with both at the federal level, at the state level, and even at the local level. Investors come around, but when it comes to implementation, there's a huge question mark around it. Even when some of these policies are implemented, when it comes to the monitoring of this project, to ensure that either funds that have been disbursed or people that have been given the responsibility to take up this project, the monitoring aspect of it, for efficiency, for making sure that the goal is actually achieved, we end up seeing question marks as well there. So it's just a huge dough ball that we need to ensure that we get the outcomes that we're really looking out for.
Okay, well, let's hope that politics is also in the air.
Exactly.
The new administration will look that way.
Yes.
But maybe just before you go, what's going on in the commodity space?
Well, generally, we're seeing prices slow. general commodity prices slow down, and that's because of the harvest season. Although the harvest is not as bumper, we know what has happened like 2 months ago with the flooding, how that has capped a lot of our harvest. But we're seeing some commodity prices slow down. But commodities like pepper, tomatoes, their prices are really high. And as we enter into the festive season, typical price hikes combined with an increase in consumer demand, with lower harvest yields, would definitely keep prices high, and this will continue to weigh on consumer disposable income, because people are not exactly receiving an increase in their wages just yet to or at least an increase in their wages compared to the increase in inflation rate, to help them mitigate against the increase in prices.
Yeah, and it doesn't look like inflation is tapering anytime soon, at least
Yes.
not in Nigeria.
Yeah.
Although we saw Kenya yesterday, they had a taper in their inflation. But anyway, thank you so much. Maybe we'll talk to you again on Thursday,
Yeah.
God's grace, and we'll have update by then.
Yes.
Enjoy the
Thank you
rest of
very
your day.
much. Thank you.
All right, let's take a breather. We'll be back here on Business Morning, and it's on Channels Television.